It was 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday when my phone buzzed, jolting me out of a groggy half-sleep. In that blurry moment between consciousness and dreams, I saw her name flash across the screen. Miranda. 10 years. A decade of shared mornings, arguments over whose turn it was to take out the trash, the laughter when we got lost on road trips. And now this. Just married, Jeremy. You're pathetic, by the way. My fingers shook as I opened the attachment. The image that loaded was a punch straight to the gut. Miranda and her co-worker grinning under the garish glow of pink neon. Wedding attire be damned. They held a marriage certificate like a carnival prize, drunken and triumphant. My stomach clenched. I stared at that picture for what felt like an eternity, but was probably no more than 30 seconds. I could almost hear the echo of her laughter, see the arrogance in her eyes. The betrayal smeared across her face like lipstick she applied just for this moment. All those nights I stayed late at the office to cover her when she was too exhausted. Every credit card bill I paid. The house deed in my name. The car registration I signed without a second thought, trusting that we meant us. But she had forgotten that we also meant me. I set my jaw and typed one word, cool. It felt inadequate, but it was enough. It was my declaration that I wasn't going to plead or beg. I wasn't going to send her a string of self-pitying texts or call the police claiming emotional distress. All those years I funked over promises. Now she would taste the real thing, not empty words, but decisive action. I slid out of bed, every muscle alive with a single, ironclad purpose, to erase her. I dressed quickly in jeans and a hoodie, the fabric rough against my skin but a perfect shield for what came next. I lit a cigarette for the first time in years, inhaling the acrid smoke and letting it steal me. I glanced around our shared bedroom. Miranda's favorite silk pillowcases, the framed photo of our wedding, the half-unpacked boxes from our last move. None of it mattered anymore. Everything belonged to me, and I intended to take it back. My first call was to the bank. I need all cards in my name only, I told the teller, voice steady. Close every joint account. Revoke her privileges. I didn't mention my wife had married someone else at 2:47 a.m. I simply cited safety concerns. Within minutes, the bank froze her credit, rerouted automatic payments, and flagged any suspicious transactions. Next was the car dealership. I want her removed as an authorized driver, I instructed, providing the dealer with a copy of the certificate I had lying on my desk. The old agreement was null and void. I crossed that line out with a flourish. By 3:15, as the sky was beginning to lighten, I was wired not with anger but purpose. I called a 24-hour locksmith, a hulking man with tired eyes who gave me a nod that spoke volumes. No questions. $300 later, I held new keys in my hand. The telling satisfaction of changing locks at 3:45 a.m. has a clarity no marriage vow can match. I drove home in silence, the city's deserted streets rolling past like an audience to my metamorphosis. At 5 a.m., I changed the locks. The stale scent of our shared life evaporated when I slammed the door shut behind me. All access revoked, physical and financial. I stood in the empty hallway, listening. No footsteps, no pleading voice. Just the quiet hum of dawn breaking over the horizon. I pocketed the old keys. They might have been hers this morning, but by sunrise they were worthless. At 5:05 a.m., I slipped back into bed, exhaustion finally catching up to me. For the first time in years, I slept like a baby, undaunted, unburdened, and entirely free. The chapters of my life with Miranda had closed exactly when I wanted them to. I didn't need apologies or explanations. She had declared her choice in Vegas, and I had declared mine right back in our bedroom. Cool. That single word was all I needed. And in that decisive moment, I knew I meant it. By 3:15 a.m., the adrenaline that had pulsed through my veins since the Vegas text finally settled into a fierce clarity. I was no longer dazed by betrayal. I was galvanized by the mechanics of undoing 10 years of joint ownership. Miranda had never understood logistics, how bank authorizations worked, whose name the mortgage sat under, or how auto titles remained ironclad in the original registrant's name. I did. I'd handled every bill, every account, every detail, trusting that us meant a team. Now I would apply that knowledge to dismantle everything she took for granted. I sat at my kitchen table, the overhead light humming in the stillness, and made a list. First, revoke her access to our bank accounts. Second, remove her as an authorized driver on my car. Third, change the locks, both digital and physical. Fourth, cancel her credit cards. Fifth, reroute any mail or packages addressed to both of us. Sixth, block her email and phone as official account notifications would come to me only. I read each item aloud, savoring how the words revoke and cancel tasted in the silence. The bank came first. I dialed the customer service number, calm and collected. "I'm the primary account holder," I said, providing my social security number and date of birth. "My wife, Miranda, last name, was recently married elsewhere. I need to remove her as an authorized user, freeze any pending transactions under her name, and reissue my cards immediately." The teller hesitated, likely searching policy guidelines, but the corporate language was on my side. Proof of identity plus a clear statement of unauthorized activity. Within minutes, her cards were canceled, and I was told new ones would arrive at my address only. Next, the car. Our shared vehicle. A sleek SUV we leased 5 years ago sat in the driveway, gleaming under the street lamp. I called the dealership's 24-hour service line. "I'd like to revoke any secondary drivers on my lease agreement," I explained, sending a scanned image of the marriage certificate for proof that she had legally made herself unavailable under our contract. As of 4 a.m., only I held the right to operate or refinance the vehicle. I pictured her pulling up in that driveway later and being denied entry, the engine's hum replaced by a cold engine block. The locksmith arrived at 4:15 a.m., a burly man in a reflective vest who eyed me without judgment. He asked no questions beyond. "Same locks, new keys?" I nodded. He worked in silence, his tools clicking and whirring like a mechanical heart. New deadbolts slid into place, and a new keypad blinked to life. By 4:45, the old keys were useless. I pocketed the spares and handed him a crisp bill with a nod of thanks. "You're welcome," he grunted, packing up and disappearing into the night. With the physical and financial barriers secured, I turned to digital domains, email, cell service, subscription accounts. Miranda's address was removed from our streaming services, our grocery delivery subscriptions, and even our shared cloud storage. I updated passwords, two-step authentication enabled, and set up alerts for any login attempts using her credentials. I imagined her frustration when she tried to stream our favorite shows or check the grocery balance and found herself locked out. Every ping of a failed login would echo her own failure and fidelity. At 5 a.m., I surveyed the aftermath. The house felt smaller, oddly hollow without her presence. The refrigerator hummed emptily, our shared coffee mugs sat on the counter, and that silk robe of hers still draped over the bathroom door. I gathered her toothbrush and a few sentimental items into a box labeled with a Sharpie, Miranda. "Do not open until legal counsel." I placed it on the front porch with a note. "Your belongings have been retrieved. Contact me for pickup after legal resolution." Then I pulled the door closed and pressed the new keypad. The lock clicked shut like a gavel. I returned to bed, the digital clock casting 5:05 a.m. in stark red numerals across the ceiling. In the space of 2 hours, I'd converted betrayal into procedure, heartbreak into process. My mind, which had once spun with shame and confusion, now rested on a bedrock of control. The weight on my chest lifted. I no longer feared the unknown of her next move because I'd anticipated every contingency. She had gambled on our life and lost. I had outplayed her at her own game, converting emotional anguish into systematic eradication. Exhaustion finally crept in, pulling me under like a gentle tide. For the first time in days, maybe weeks, I felt the possibility of sleep unfurl before me. My last conscious thought was a simple affirmation. I did this for myself, not out of vengeance, but justice, my own brand of justice, applied at exactly 3:15 a.m. when purpose eclipsed hurt. And as I drifted off, the midnight reset complete, I realized that freedom sometimes comes in the quiet hours, when the world sleeps and you reclaim your own life one lock, one account, one key at a time. The knock came at 8 a.m., sharp and insistent, rattling through the empty halls of the house I had reclaimed. In the pale light of dawn filtering through half-drawn blinds, I paused mid-coffee pour, heart twisting briefly with a flicker of apprehension. My new locks held firm, but the unexpected urgency of the sound took me by surprise. I set the mug down and walked to the door, noticing how silent the house felt without Miranda's morning hum or the clatter of her hairdryer. I opened the door to find 2 uniformed officers standing on my porch, their expressions polite but businesslike. One was older, salt and pepper hair neatly trimmed, eyes softened by decades of experience. The other looked fresh-faced, barely out of the academy, shifting from foot to foot like he regretted wearing a tie at this hour. The older officer cleared his throat. "Sir, we received a call from your wife. She says you've locked her out and taken all her possessions." He gestured to the sealed boxes on the porch. I held the door with one hand and raised my phone with the other, sliding to the correct screen. "Check your timestamps," I said calmly, pressing play on the Vegas photo message. The timestamp glowed in the corner of the image. 2:47 a.m. She informed me at 2:47 a.m. that she'd married someone else. Please note, this certificate is from Nevada. My wife, or rather my former wife, is legally married to another man. I tilted my head slightly, inviting them to look closer. The younger officer's lips twitched as if he were fighting back amusement. He leaned forward to examine the photo more carefully. The glow of the certificate's embossed seal reflected in his eyes. The older officer reached into his jacket and flipped open his notepad. "So this is all a civil matter?" he asked, his voice gentle but firm. "We can't force you to let her back in." I nodded, feeling a rush of relief that the law sided with me in a clear-cut way. "That's correct. She's no longer my spouse, and these locks are within my legal right. She can resolve matters through her attorney." The older officer glanced at his partner, then back at me. "You may wish to document everything, sir. This might head to family court if she pursues it." I offered them a brief summary. How I had revoked her account privileges, changed the locks, and boxed her belongings with a polite notice. I described Miranda's refusal to pay bills for years and how she'd funneled money from our joint grocery account into her own storage fund. The officers exchanged looks. Off-the-record sympathy for my situation, no doubt, and the older man wrapped the side of his helmet. "Well, sir, there's nothing more we can do here. Best of luck." As they stepped off the porch, I caught a glimpse of Miranda's face at the end of the driveway. She stood in sweatpants and an old t-shirt, hair mussed and eyes red-rimmed. She watched them leave, betrayal and indignation flickering across her features. She opened her mouth, probably to shout, but no words came. She held up her phone, as though she were about to record video evidence of our civil injustice, but the officers had already driven away. I closed the door softly and leaned against the frame, the rush of adrenaline slowing to a hum. The house felt impossibly still, too still, as if it were holding its breath. I returned to the kitchen counter and poured myself a fresh cup of coffee. Steam curled up like a ghost of our past life, but for the first time, it didn't bring a knot to my chest. It brought clarity. Miranda was on her own now, for better or worse. I glanced at the boxes on the front porch through the frosted glass panel. Each one bore my neat black ink label, Miranda Personal Effects. I pictured her rummaging through them later, forced to confront the reality of what she had done and what she had lost. No more shared keys, shared credit, shared life. Only this evidence of her sudden departure and the consequences I had meticulously laid out. By mid-morning, the neighborhood had come alive. Joggers on the sidewalk, the ice cream truck jingling down the block, neighbors gathering their mail. I stepped outside to retrieve a stray package and found a few curious glances. Word travels fast in suburban circles, even at 10 a.m. I caught Mrs. Abrahams peering over her fence and gave her a nod. She looked away, feigning disinterest, but I noticed the slight lift of her brow. I couldn't blame her. Our drama was the kind of spectacle that made front-page gossip in small circles. Back inside, I checked my phone again. No messages from Miranda, no calls, only the lingering echo of her half-hearted, "You're pathetic" text. My lawyer's number flashed on the screen, reminding me of the custody and divorce proceedings that lay ahead. I knew I had to file the paperwork soon or let her lawyer initiate it. But in that moment, I savored the advantage of precision, the law sliding through my fingers like a knight's lance in a joust. I had positioned myself perfectly, morally justified, legally protected, emotionally detached. I stepped into my home office, the computer's glow welcoming me like an ally. Documents awaited, from sales agreements to revised lease terms, but I felt no rush. Miranda had disrupted my sleep schedule, my assumptions, and my trust, but she hadn't disrupted my resolve. I opened a fresh document and typed the heading, Divorce Petition. The words were clinical, lacking drama, but they cut deeper than any angry phone call. They were the final seal on a contract broken across the Nevada desert. As I formatted the pages, my phone buzzed once. I glanced down to see a text from Marlon, my best friend, sending new evidence he'd uncovered about Miranda's grocery fraud. He called it the final nail. I allowed myself a small, satisfied smile. I copied the attachments into my divorce folder and replied, Perfect timing. By noon, the police visit chapter of my life was closed. The officers had validated my claim, and Miranda was left standing where legal and emotional realities collided. I poured a second cup of coffee and toasted my empty kitchen, the steam rising between us like a benediction. The house was mine again, not in the romantic sense of ownership, but in the hard-earned assurance that every lock, every account, every document bore my signature and my intent. In that moment, I realized that sometimes freedom doesn't roar. It knocks politely, in pairs of uniformed officers, and hands you back the keys. By mid-afternoon, the chaos I had engineered earlier that morning coalesced into a new kind of storm when Miranda reappeared at my doorstep alongside her freshly minted spouse and the supporting cast of her family drama. I opened the door to find her standing there in a curled-up euphoric pose, despite the humiliation painted across her flushed features, while Jeremy lingered behind her like an awkward guest at his own party who wasn't quite sure if he belonged. His posture was tense, shoulders hunched as though he expected the entire wall to collapse on him at any moment, and the flicker in his eyes betrayed a dawning realization that perhaps he had married more than a person. He'd married an entire life that wasn't his own. Flanking them were Charlene, Miranda's mother, arms crossed in a defiant stance, and Monica, her sister, spitting righteous indignation with every word she mouthed but didn't yet speak. Their collective fury hummed in the humid afternoon air, rattling the screens on my porch like a swarm of angry cicadas. "Open up," Miranda began, her voice pitched higher than reality allowed. "You can't do this. This is my home, our home." She threw the word "our" at me as though it were a shield she could wield. I leaned casually against the doorframe, coffee in hand, studying their ragtag assembly. Jeremy shuffled one foot forward, then back, as if stepping into my property line required a special permit. Charlene's eyes bored into mine, and Monica tapped her foot impatiently. I took a slow sip of coffee, black, of course, and let the silence stretch until even the air seemed nervous. Finally, I set the mug on a side table by the door and tilted my head. "You're home? You married someone else in Vegas. This house, the mortgage, the utilities, they're all under my name. You don't get to decide these things unilaterally." My tone was the calm before a storm, measured, unwavering. Miranda's lip trembled, but she squared her shoulders and tried again. "This is emotional abuse. You can't just lock me out." Beneath her anger, I detected something else, desperation. She was realizing that in her bid to claim freedom, she had inadvertently handed me full control. Charlene stepped forward, thin lips pursed. "We're demanding access. Right now. You will open that door and let her in." She nodded subtly at Monica, who reached into a purse the size of a small suitcase. Miranda's sister produced a U-Haul contract and waved it under my nose. "I'll just load her things back in," Monica declared, swiping her credit card at my expense. I watched the card decline 3 times before Jeremy, sweating, pulled out his own card and paid the fee. The transaction message blinked up on the device screen. "Payment accepted." I allowed a small smile to flick across my face as Monica scooped up the contract and strode toward the garage. I stepped aside, opening the door wide enough for them to see the rows of sealed boxes lining the garage edge. Each box bore a single word in bold: Miranda. There were clothes, shoes, personal effects, enough memorabilia to evoke years of shared memories. The duct tape sealing each lid was freshly applied, the edges neat and unforgiving. As they filed past, Miranda hesitated at the first box, fingertips brushing the tape, and I could almost hear her yearning to rip it open, to retrieve a fragment of her past. But she did not. She simply watched as Monica yanked a box toward the moving truck, the tape tearing with a hollow shudder. Jeremy lingered by the garage door, rubbing his neck. He looked as though he regretted the wedding photo he'd smiled for only hours before. When he caught my gaze, I offered him a nod of acknowledgement. "You knew what you were getting into." He looked away. Charlene muttered something about imminent lawsuits, and Monica barked about theft of joint property. I crossed my arms. "All of these boxes contained your personal items only. I've left behind everything that was jointly purchased before you vanished last night." I turned and walked back into the house, pausing on the threshold to deliver my final point. "You have 1 hour to finish loading. After that, I call the tow truck." Miranda's scream cut through the afternoon calm like shattered glass. "You can't do this," she wailed. But her defiance sounded thin, like a song sung off-key. I shrugged and headed to my home office, leaving the door swinging open behind me. I paused as I stepped inside and asked without looking back, "Need anything else?" Her voice faltered. Jeremy inhaled sharply. The driveway brimmed with boxes and the purring engine of the U-Haul, and the clock on my phone chimed in with precise indifference, 2:03 p.m. I settled into my chair and watched their silhouettes through the window. Inside, the house felt vast again, the emptiness echoing off the walls like applause. The living room sofa looked pristine without any stray pillows spilled across it. On the coffee table sat the fresh, unopened mail addressed solely to me. Account statements verifying the closure of her financial accounts, a new vehicle registration sticker in my name, and a final divorce summons delivered early by my lawyer's assistant. I leaned forward to read the summons, petition for dissolution of marriage printed in bold, civilized letters. It read like a victory proclamation. From the window, I heard the lock of the garage click shut. Miranda stepped back into view, arms wrapped around herself, blood leaking from her humiliation in tight lines. Jeremy stood beside her, looking smaller than before. Charlene and Monica slid into the cab of the U-Haul, fueled by righteous indignation and familial loyalty. The truck's engine roared to life, and they backed down the driveway. Miranda dropped her head against the steering wheel for one last instant before they pulled away, leaving dust swirling in the sunlight. The taillights blinked once, twice, and then the truck disappeared around the corner. I exhaled and closed the window. The welcome party was over. In the space of an hour, I had orchestrated a flawless eviction, dismantling the facade of our shared life with nothing more than decisive action and an understanding of contractual obligations. The neighborhood returned to its hum of lawnmowers and barking dogs, as though nothing out of the ordinary had happened. I removed my suit jacket, folded it neatly on the sofa, and poured myself a drink. I raised the glass to the empty room and toasted, to moving forward, to regained autonomy, to the welcome party no one asked me to attend but that I chaired perfectly. Then I sank into the cushions and let the quiet wrap around me, knowing that I had rewritten the script of our lives with every lock replaced and every box sealed. When Jeremy showed up at Miranda's office the next morning, I knew the consequences would be explosive. Their firm had a zero-tolerance policy for colleagues crossing lines, and I held the perfect weapon in my back pocket. That blurry pink glow Vegas wedding photo. I imagined the look on the HR director's face when I forwarded the image, the timestamp glaring like evidence against two professionals who thought they could flout company rules under neon lights. I drafted the email carefully, subject line, potential HR violation, last night's marriage certificate attached. My fingers hesitated for a moment over the send button. I felt a pang of pity for Miranda, remembering the countless times she rescued me from embarrassing missteps at work. But pity was a weak currency here. I hit send and then waited with clinical detachment. Within minutes, the ping of Miranda's inbox went silent. I pictured her in her cubicle, phone buzzing unanswered as colleagues exchanged curious glances. I could almost hear the hushed whispers, the click of office gossip spreading faster than any social media post. Jeremy, whose face had carried the honeymoon glow only hours before, was now a pariah in an open-plan office where confidentiality mattered above all. HR summoned them both to a closed-door meeting. I expected stern lectures, perhaps warnings, but my sources told me the policy mandated termination of one or both violators. Sweet justice, I thought, watching the dominoes tumble. Miranda, in her usual flair for drama, didn't stay silent for long. She accused me of manufacturing a scandal and public shaming her for profit, as if she had any claim to profit left in our marriage. She cited emotional abuse, financial controlling behavior, and threatened to file a complaint against me for harassment. Her words were theatrical, designed to elicit sympathy, but they rang hollow when measured against the cold truth of her bank statements. I had them all printed and bound, ledgers showing every bill I paid, every automatic withdrawal she never contested. One could trace her financial disengagement like a breadcrumb trail leading straight to betrayal. Her lawyers jumped on the grocery account issue as the next battleground. Joint grocery account, she argued, was created for both our benefit. She painted it as a loving gesture, a shared fund for meals and household staples. But in reality, that debit card was tied solely to my checking account, a generous convenience I never questioned. I discovered her subterfuge when I reconciled our spending for tax purposes. Every month, half the grocery budget went unaccounted for, siphoned off into purchases she logged as miscellaneous. Cosmetics, dresses, personal development books, all labeled innocuously to avoid detection. I confronted her once, thinking it was a misunderstanding, but she laughed it off as though my arithmetic was flawed. I compiled the evidence with meticulous care. Spreadsheets with color-coded categories, bank alerts of ATM withdrawals late at night, itemized receipts showing sums that didn't match the grocery totals. My friend Marlon, a tech savant, helped me cross-reference metadata from her smartphone photos to pinpoint dates and locations. We proved she pocketed thousands over months, funding side trips to boutiques and weekend getaways she never disclosed. When I laid it all out for her, printed graphs, timestamps, cell tower pings, her composure cracked. She sputtered denials, but I had already delivered the knockout blow. I sent the file to her attorney with a concise note. Evidence of unauthorized funds diversion, Exhibit A. Watching her scramble to explain herself in the legal arena was unexpectedly gratifying. She who had wielded money as leverage over me for years now found herself outmatched by the very ledgers she thought I never noticed. Every claim of financial abuse she made rang hollow when contrasted with her own misappropriation. As the divorce proceedings advanced, her exoneration narratives and tearful declarations lost credibility. Her office romance imploded, her finances lay bare, and her credibility lay in tatters. And through it all, I sat in my downtown condo, drinking coffee each morning labeled by Janelle as absolutely not Jeremy, feeling the weight of 10 years lift off my shoulders. In the silent victory of meticulous record-keeping and unapologetic action, I found a sense of justice that no Vegas vow could ever match. Miranda's social media blitz began just after sunrise, and by mid-morning my phone buzzed with a flurry of notifications, texts from concerned friends, direct messages from strangers offering support, and a steady stream of angry emojis from distant cousins who assumed the worst. She'd turned her Facebook and Instagram into a battleground, painting me as a heartless tyrant who had coldly stripped her of home and dignity in the dead of night. Each post was more dramatic than the last. Tear-streaked selfies on the front porch, outraged calls for emotional intervention, pleas for anyone to stand up to my abusive behavior. Charlene and Monica amplified every update, sharing them with legal threats attached like battle flags. The corner of my lips twitched in amusement. I knew how these things worked. Perception was everything, and Miranda was banking on the gullibility of an audience hungry for gossip. I leaned back in my office chair, scanning the barrage of public sentiment, and tapped out a private message to my friend Marlon. Deploy Plan B. Within minutes, a folder landed in my inbox, a meticulously organized archive of Miranda's texts to Jeremy, stretching back months, documenting her intentions in stark clarity. There were negotiations about dates and times for secret rendezvous at hotels, screenshots of chats where she bragged about draining him dry and never looking back, and even recorded voice notes where she laughed about the plan to flip the script on me once she had everything sorted. These messages, taken out of any possible context, spoke volumes. I drafted a calm, factual post on my own social feeds, since many have asked for my side. Here are unedited screenshots. I've never hidden anything. You decide. With that, I uploaded the key excerpts, carefully selected passages showing Miranda's calculated collusion with Jeremy to exploit me financially and emotionally. The posts went live, and I watched the internet shift beneath my fingertips. Comments poured in, shock, disbelief, apologies to me for having doubted, and scathing rebukes of Miranda's duplicity. Mutual friends who had taken her side began deleting her statements and tagging her in terse, corrective responses. The momentum swung like a pendulum, and I let it build. By late afternoon, the tide had turned. HR at Miranda's firm was sharing news of the scandal, not out of malice, but in acknowledgement that this was a real breach of professionalism. Friends who had privately expressed concern for her now reached out to me, saying they had no idea she planned such an elaborate betrayal. Even Charlene's social media allies started distancing themselves, muting her posts with little notes like, "Sorry, but I can't promote dishonesty." Monica's righteous indignation lost its steam as the evidence stacked up against her sister. It was the most surreal kind of justice, public vindication served cold, pixel by pixel. Yet as the virtual fireworks exploded behind the screen, I maintained my composure. I had learned that in high-stakes drama, restraint looked like strength, so I didn't gloat. I didn't taunt or throw in personal jabs. I simply presented the facts and let their weight speak. When a mutual friend asked if I felt remorse, I replied in a direct message, "Regret is for mistakes." This was intentional on both sides. I did what needed doing. That answer circulated quietly among my inner circle, reinforcing the narrative that I was the wronged party, decisive and controlled. In the physical world, the impact was just as tangible. Invitations arrived from neighbors offering spare rooms in case I felt unsafe at home. A few business contacts, previously on the fence about working with me, sent messages of solidarity, reiterating their trust in my integrity. I even received a call from a local journalist who had covered domestic disputes before. He requested an interview to tell the other side of the story. I agreed, stipulating that he present the full record of my evidence and Miranda's hidden exchanges. When he published his article, it was a masterclass in balanced reporting. 3 paragraphs of her accusations followed by 7 paragraphs of indisputable proof. As the sun set, I walked through my now peaceful neighborhood, the golden hour bathing the freshly painted front door in warm light. The laughter of children playing in a nearby yard and the distant hum of traffic felt like affirmations of normalcy returning. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, I didn't feel the ache of betrayal. That sting had been replaced by a smooth, steady hum of resolution. The world had witnessed Miranda's true colors, and I had emerged not only unbroken but vindicated. That evening, Marlon and I met at our favorite corner bar. He slid a celebratory beer across the counter. We clinked bottles and toasted to cold, hard evidence. May it always speak louder than tears. He laughed, eyes gleaming, and I felt genuine gratitude for his loyalty and technical prowess. We talked through potential fallout. Miranda might attempt to counterstrike. Her lawyers could threaten defamation claims, and there was the small matter of finalizing asset division and custody terms. But armed with raw data and public support, I felt ready for any challenge. Back home, I sat at my desk and began drafting the next phase of my legal strategy. The divorce petition needed amendments to include misconduct findings, which could influence alimony and asset distribution. I outlined bullet points, referencing the screenshots and official responses from HR and legal counsel. My gaze lingered on the carefully organized file folder, the digital certificate gleaming on my screen. Evidence. Final. Outside, the night thickened, and I heard the hush of the city settling. Before turning off the light, I posted one final message. This chapter closes here. I wish Miranda no ill will, only honesty for her future. It was brief, almost perfunctory, but it carried gravity. I turned off my computer, the glow retreating into darkness, and at last, I felt a calm confidence in the narrative I'd reclaimed. Damage control had gone nuclear, and instead of burning everything to ashes, I'd used the blast to clear a path for something new. In the aftermath of that digital war, I discovered that truth, when wielded with precision, is the most powerful weapon and the most honest companion. When the sun had climbed to its zenith and the neighborhood buzzed with midday energy, I thought the worst of the chaos was behind me. I was wrong. The first crack came as a frantic call from my boss, Elaine, a titan of the industry with little patience for petty drama. "Micah, I've just received a phone call from Miranda's father," she said, her tone clipped but with an undercurrent of bewildered amusement. "He's accusing you of harassment. My inbox is flooding with accusations. Care to explain?" I paused, tasting my iced coffee, and let the silence stretch long enough for her to realize how absurd the claim sounded. "Elaine," I began carefully, "my ex-wife's father called you? I thought he'd stay out of this." I snorted at my own understatement. "He's upset I locked her out and posted evidence of her infidelity. But harassment? I think legal definition might differ from emotional reaction." There was a soft sigh on the other end. "He's hysterical, crawling under my skin with those voicemails. But I trust you. I need a summary. I'll file it with HR." I rattled off the events in succinct fashion. The Vegas declaration, the lock change, the divorce petition, the evidence dump. Elaine's legendary pragmatism kicked in, and within minutes, she sent a brief email to corporate HR that read, "Subject: false harassment claims. Please dismiss." Details on my desk. That was victory number 1 of the day. My professional reputation secured even as Miranda's father tried to weaponize it. No sooner had I hung up than a new alarm sounded. My doorbell camera pinged with motion. I opened the video feed to see Miranda in full Karen regalia, bold floral blouse, oversized sunglasses perched on her head, and an expression of righteous entitlement. She jabbed at the doorbell button repeatedly, her voice muffled through the intercom as she demanded, "Open this door, Micah." "You're a monster." My allergies flared at the sight of her. I remembered that she'd once suggested we get a cat, though I was mortally allergic. I took a slow breath, muted the speaker, and typed a quick reply on the intercom screen. "Property secured. Contact your lawyer." Moments later, I stumbled upon the next absurdity, a flurry of social media posts claiming I had killed her cat in a jealous rage. I blinked at the headlines, "Micah accused of animal cruelty." My brow furrowed. We had never owned a cat. I hadn't even stepped foot in a pet store in years. This felt like the final punctuation on her delight in rewriting reality. I opened our shared chat group, now exclusively populated by mutual friends who had watched this saga unfold, and posted a simple question. "I have never owned a cat. Can anyone confirm?" Responses flooded in. "There was never a cat. I thought that was a roommate's pet?" "That might be your allergy misremembering." The consensus was clear. Miranda was fabricating claims to generate sympathy. I printed screenshots of the denials and added them to the evidence final folder. If she was going to concoct a cat, I could counter with a chorus of witnesses. That evening, as the sky blazed orange, the final blow landed, a tearful voicemail from my own mother. Her voice quavered with false concern as she begged me to reconcile. "Micah," she sobbed. "Miranda called me crying. She sounds so lost. You promised her forever. Please, take her back." I pressed my palm to my forehead, feeling the weight of her sorrow. I loved my mother fiercely, but I refused to be guilted into punishment for someone else's betrayal. I called her back, tucking the phone between shoulder and ear as I paced the length of my living room. "Mom, she married someone else. In Vegas." At 2:47 a.m., I reminded her gently. I could almost hear my mother's frail heart splinter at that reminder. She compounded every promise you cherished by sneaking around with someone else and draining our accounts. This decision, it's not about her feeling lost. It's about accountability. There was a long pause. I pictured her leaning against her kitchen counter, the afternoon sun slanting through lace curtains. "I suppose I understand," she said, voice thick. I worry for her." My chest tightened. "I know you do, but I need you to worry about me now. I'm the one who stayed." I closed with love and hung up, feeling a twist of sorrow for my mother's pain, but a resolve even stronger than before. In the following days, Miranda's screaming fits at my door became routine. Each time, I recorded the interaction, textbook evidence of trespassing and harassment. Whenever she threatened Grandma's pearls, insisting I return the heirlooms she claimed were stolen, I produced the appraisal she'd signed 5 years ago, proving the pearls remained safely with her grandmother, alive and well. I posted those documents privately to my lawyer, building a protective case against any frivolous restraining order she might seek. Through it all, I found myself slipping into clarity rather than chaos. Each false claim she hurled, police visits, emotional outbursts, feigned vulnerability, became bricks in the wall between our past and my future. I reinforced that wall daily. New locks, legal filings, public evidence dumps, and a refusal to engage beyond official channels. As her tactics grew more desperate, my strategy grew more focused. On a quiet Sunday morning, I walked past the closed door, drawing her screams into muffled echoes. I sipped my coffee and let the lyrics of a familiar song drift through my headphones. No cat claws would scratch at my conscience. No harassing text would penetrate my walls. No guilt-laden voicemail would uproot my resolve. I had survived betrayal, legal skirmishes, public spectacle, and familial pressure. I had watched Elaine defend me, neighbors rally behind me, and friends stand with me. That afternoon, I printed the last document for my attorney, a comprehensive log of every encounter, from the Vegas declaration to the fraudulent cat claim. As I signed it, I realized how far I had come, from a man blindsided in the middle of the night to someone who could face down every scream, every lie, every tear with unshakable conviction. The screams, the cat, and the call had threatened to unmoor me, but instead they tightened my grip on truth. I filed the folder away under Chapter 7, Acquittal, a testament to how falsehoods, when confronted with clarity, crumble into dust. And in that unwavering aftermath, I found the final trace of peace. Late one evening, as the city's pulse slowed to a gentle thrum, my phone buzzed with an unknown caller ID. I nearly ignored it. My past days spent fielding calls from Miranda's allies had taught me to guard my attention. But the number revealed itself not as a private line, but as Sarah, Jeremy's mother. My heart thudded, curious and wary. I answered, bracing myself for another hail of complaints or sobbing pleas. "Micah." Sarah's voice was soft, almost tremulous. I recognized the accent, gentle Midwestern lilt with an undertone of refined grace. She spoke with measured caution, like someone wading into cold water. I know you're hurting, but please, I'm begging you, take Miranda back. I paused, caught off guard by her request. Take her back. I echoed, scanning my dimly lit apartment. The walls bore no photographs of him, no shared souvenirs, just the silent triumph of reclaimed possession. Yes, she whispered, as if the word itself pained her. Jeremy, he's overwhelmed. He made a mistake. He thought it was right. But I talked to him, he's scared. He thinks he can't be the man she wants, and he doesn't know how to fix this. I sat down, exhaling slowly. A mother's plea, soft, vulnerable, earnest. Yet it felt like an echo from the opposite bank of my own boundless empathy. 10 years of shared life, 10 weeks of chaos, and now I was supposed to step back into the freefall? My voice remained calm, steady. Sarah, I understand you want to protect your son. I truly do. But this isn't about who made a mistake in the moment. It's about the months of planning, the deceit, the exploitation. Miranda hasn't asked for forgiveness. She orchestrated a perfect betrayal. I heard her swallow on the other end. I know. I see it now. But you're the only one she'll listen to. She respects you, and she loves you. Her voice cracked there, maternal concern bleeding through. I closed my eyes, picturing my own mother's face, her furrowed brow, the glint of tears when she'd realized the truth. Sarah, I said, softer now. I'm not unsympathetic, but I can't be the safety net for their impulsive marriage. I can't bear her pain so that Jeremy can pretend it never happened. That would undo every lesson I've learned this week. My tone was firm but gentle, like guiding a startled animal back to its cage. There was a long silence, punctuated only by the faint hum of traffic outside my window. I imagined her pacing a quiet suburban kitchen, worry the only seasoning on her late-night tea. Finally, she sighed, a sound of defeat and maternal heartbreak. I suppose you're right. I just hoped you'd understand. The hope in her voice was fragile, as though a single breath could shatter it. Sarah, I said, gathering my resolve, I hope Jeremy finds his peace, that he learns from this. But our marriage is over. The locks are changed, the accounts are secured, and I'm moving on. I wish Miranda well, genuinely, but I can't rebuild what she obliterated. I heard a faint sob on the other end. I'll talk to Jeremy, she whispered. Thank you for hearing me. As I hung up, a profound sense of closure settled over me. This intervention, so unexpected, so tender, was the final bridge between my old life and what lay ahead. I realized that compassion, while a precious gift, must be directed wisely. My compassion for Miranda and Jeremy could not overshadow my responsibility to myself. I stood, walked to the window, and looked down on the city lights shimmering like distant promises. The next morning, a message arrived from Sarah, brief and respectful. He understands now. He's reaching out for counseling. Thank you for your patience. I didn't reply. Instead, I deleted the message, archiving the conversation as another chapter closed. My focus turned to my own future, plans for the downtown condo, weekly coffee dates with Janelle, finally scheduling that therapy appointment to unpack the last of the grief. Later that afternoon, I found myself back at the corner cafe where I'd celebrated small victories with Marlon. I ordered my usual black coffee with a shot of almond syrup and let the barista label it, not her. I tucked into a seat by the window, notebook open, jotting down goals for the next month. Finalized divorce terms, save for a proper vacation, launched the new podcast I'd been dreaming about. Each item was a step away from the wreckage and towards something I build on my own terms. In that bright cafe light, surrounded by the hum of casual conversations and the hiss of espresso machines, I felt the last tendrils of doubt slip away. Sarah's intervention, though heartfelt, had not shaken me. It had affirmed my path. I looked down at the coffee before me, took a slow sip, and smiled. The road ahead was mine to chart, guided by lessons of trust and boundaries. And as I watched the steam curl upward, I finally recognized the truth I'd carried but not yet embraced. Closure isn't about forgiving everyone. It's about forgiving yourself for choosing freedom over false loyalty. With that, I packed my notebook, paid my bill, and stepped into the crisp afternoon air. The city stretched around me, vast and inviting, each block a new possibility. I walked with purpose, each footstep echoing a singular thought. I am done with Chapter 8, and Chapter 9 awaits. I arrived at the courthouse just past 8, the early morning light picking out every smudge on my blazer and every crease in my freshly pressed shirt. The marble steps felt colder than usual under my shoes, as if the building itself disapproved of the ceremony about to unfold inside. My hands itched with both anticipation and dread. Divorce court wasn't a spectacle I'd ever imagined witnessing, let alone as the central figure, but here I was, carrying every ounce of evidence, every shred of betrayal, into a room designed to dissolve what had once been sacred. Inside the hushed hallway, I spotted Miranda at the end of the aisle, a vision of tragic irony in her pristine white dress. She stood beneath the courtroom's dome of fluorescent lights, a halo defiled by circumstance. The gown was simple, lace bodice, flowing skirt. But on her, it looked like the remnants of a broken promise. Her sister Monica hovered at her side, lips pursed, while Charlene hovered behind like a matronly specter. Jeremy was nowhere in sight. I felt a flicker of pity. He'd been swallowed by this drama, but it vanished as quickly as it came. This was no time for mercy. I slid into a wooden pew across the aisle, the polished surface cold against my fingertips as I placed my briefcase beside me. The room smelled of polished wood, sour coffee, and old paper. My lawyer sat next to me, clicking through the file on his laptop screen. Marriage certificate, bank statements, text messages, and screenshots of net worth calculations. He gave me a nod of reassurance. I returned it with a tight smile. In that moment, all the emotional wind had been funneled into meticulous preparation. The bailiff called us to order, and before I knew it, it was our turn. I stood, smoothing my jacket, and followed my lawyer to the bench. The judge, a stern woman with silver hair pulled into a tight bun, regarded us over her glasses. I sensed her impatience. She had undoubtedly seen countless divorce petitions, claims of cruelty, spats over property. I wasn't surprised when she clasped her hands and said, "Mr. Last Name, proceed." My lawyer spoke first, outlining the facts succinctly. Miranda's unilateral decision to marry in Nevada, the subsequent financial separation, and the detailed misconduct uncovered in months of messages and ledgers. He referenced the evidence package, bound in a neat folder, slid across the bench. The judge nodded, eyes flicking to each section until they rested on the thumbnail photograph of Miranda and Jeremy outside that neon-lit chapel, grins frozen in triumph. Then it was Miranda's turn. She rose, hands trembling at the waist of her white dress. She opened her mouth to speak, but every word was swallowed by the weight of her attire. Her lawyer, slick and practiced, attempted to argue that the Vegas marriage was a drunken mistake, an impulsive act during a bachelorette weekend gone awry. He cited emotional distress, begged for empathy, invoked the sanctity of marriage vows. Miranda's eyes glistened with tears she'd practiced in front of her bathroom mirror. Her voice cracked, as though the courtroom itself had closed its ears. The judge's expression shifted from fatigue to disbelief as she picked up Miranda's phone printouts. She scanned a highlighted text. "Can't wait to see his face when I empty the joint account. He'll never see it coming." She flipped to another screenshot. "I love how easy this is. He never suspects a thing." The judge raised an eyebrow. "Taken out of context?" Miranda whispered, voice small and uncertain. The judge leaned forward, voice icy. What context could possibly justify premeditated financial theft and betrayal of marital trust? Silence fell so heavy it pressed against my chest. Miranda's lip quivered, but no answer came. It was as if the courtroom had swallowed her rehearsed lines. Monica gripped her arm. Charlene's face was a mask of fury and embarrassment. The judge closed the folder with a decisive snap. "I find the marriage between Mr. and Mrs. Last Name dissolved," she declared. "All shared property to be distributed as follows. The marital home, currently under Mr. Last Name's sole name, to be sold with proceeds divided per agreement. The leased vehicle remains Mr. Last Name's legal property. Savings and investments as documented remain intact, and the respondent shall pay temporary support of $500 monthly toward a professional certification program funded by the petitioner." I exhaled, feeling the tension drain from my shoulders. The judge continued, "This judgment is final. Court is adjourned." The gavel struck once, and echoes rattled through the wood-paneled chamber. I sank back onto the bench, heart pounding, eyes catching Miranda's stare. Hers was a mixture of rage, shame, and defeat. She stood momentarily as if to protest, but the judge had already turned away, attending to other matters. The clerk motioned for us to leave. I gathered my belongings, briefcase, phone, wallet, and rose. My lawyer placed a supportive hand on my shoulder. We exited side by side. In the hallway, reporters and photographers gathered, eager for a soundbite. I ignored them, focusing instead on the cool marble walls and the distant sunlight streaming through the high windows. Miranda passed me on her way out, her wedding dress rustling around her ankles like the wings of a wounded bird. I saw her lips part in a silent scream, but didn't look back. Outside, the courthouse steps were slick with morning dew. I stepped into the sunlight and felt it warm my face. My lawyer passed me the final documents, certified copies of the decree, signatures, and stamps glinting like metals. I slipped them into my briefcase and nodded. "Thank you," I said simply. He offered a small, respectful smile and melted into the bustling crowd. I walked down the steps, each stride lighter than the last. The neighborhood traffic hummed as if nothing had happened, but I felt the world tilted subtly. The chapter of my life with Miranda closed. The page turned. I hailed a cab and told the driver to head downtown. As we pulled away from the courthouse, I watched Miranda's retreating figure fade among the pedestrians. She was already invisible, her white dress stained by black-hearted intent. Later that afternoon, I stood before my bank manager to finalize the sale of the house. We discussed listing price, market trends, legal fees. The contract was signed within hours. I arranged to transfer the car title into my name and watched the clerk stamp approved on the application. At my attorney's office, I reviewed the final settlement, numbers neat and unambiguous. House sale at a $75,000 profit, car fully mine, savings untouched, and a modest monthly support payment from Miranda. I signed with a sense of completion. Walking out into the late afternoon sun, I felt a serene confidence washing over me. The world was wide open again. I breathed deeply, tasted freedom. Behind me lay a courtroom drama that ended not in melodrama, but in legal clarity and personal closure. I pocketed the decree and whispered to the wind, "Cool." And this time, I truly meant it. The first thing I noticed when I stepped into my new downtown condo was the view. Floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the city skyline in a panorama of possibility. The morning sun danced off glass towers, and traffic below moved in a lazy river of ambition. I set my briefcase on the sleek marble countertop and ran my fingers along its cool surface. This space was mine, truly mine, untainted by betrayal or obligation. I'd signed the lease weeks ago, but today it felt real. Today, it felt like freedom. I headed to the kitchen, where a single, pristine coffee mug sat waiting. On its side, in Janelle's neat handwriting, it read, "Definitely not Jeremy." I smiled, the words warming me more than the coffee ever could. I opened the cabinet and found a mismatched collection of mugs, gifts from friends, souvenirs from trips, remnants of past routines. I selected one emblazoned with a skyline sketch of Lagos, a nod to home, and filled it with water. The kettle's whistle was a familiar awakening, but this time, there was no dread waiting at the other end. As the coffee brewed, I placed my wedding certificate, the divorce decree, and a framed print of that Vegas chapel side by side on the dining table. The Vegas certificate hung on my former lawyer's office wall under a plaque that read, "Case closed." Cool, but here, in my own space, it served as a reminder of how far I'd come. The divorce decree, crisp and official, declared my autonomy. Together, they formed a deliberate altar to my own resilience. I poured the coffee, black and strong, and lifted the mug to my lips. The first sip was bitter, then smooth, like a promise kept. I settled into the plush armchair by the window, mug in hand, and watched the city wake. People hustled along sidewalks, delivery trucks maneuvered through alleyways, and a street musician played chords that echoed up to my floor. For a long moment, I simply listened. No emails demanded my response. No urgent calls from Miranda's lawyer interrupted the dawn. In that stillness, I tasted a new routine, one I could shape however I pleased. My phone buzzed. A text from Janelle. "Morning. Yoga at 10? I saved you a mat." A second line followed. "Coffee's in the pot. Come over when you're ready." I took another sip, anticipation fluttering in my chest. When was the last time I looked forward to a normal morning date, instead of dreading a conflict-laden call? Exactly. I set the mug down and logged onto my laptop to finalize a podcast outline I'd been sketching for weeks. The divorce had opened not just my personal life, but my creative life. Topics ranged from navigating betrayal to rebuilding trust, and I felt a spark of purpose reignite. At 9:30, I packed my yoga bag with a change of clothes and clipped the podcast notes onto a clipboard. I flicked off the lights, locked the door with a satisfying thrum, and headed downstairs. The lobby's polished floors reflected my image back to me, a man standing straighter than he ever had before. I rode the elevator with a neighbor who smiled and nodded in friendly recognition. There was no whisper campaign here, just polite hellos and the faint scent of fresh paint. Janelle met me in the courtyard, mat in hand, and an encouraging grin on her face. The morning air was crisp, and dew clung to the grass like diamonds. We found a spot beneath a young oak tree and unrolled our mats side by side. She slipped her arm through mine and whispered, "Ready for a fresh start?" I nodded, feeling the tenderness in her gesture. We moved through poses: warrior, downward dog, tree, each flow a metaphor for balance and strength. My breath synchronized with hers, and for the first time in months, I felt something lighter than relief: hope. After yoga, we strolled to the cafe at the corner, where the barista greeted me by name. My regular order, a double espresso with almond milk, arrived before I even could order. I handed him the Lego Skyline mug, already worn and chipped, and asked him to fill it. He chuckled and said, "Bringing your own? You must really like it." I shrugged, feeling a quiet pride in consistency. I took a seat, Janelle beside me, and we shared our plans for the day. She told me about an upcoming fitness workshop she was leading, and I outlined my podcast launch timeline. Our laughter filled the small space, as rich and warm as the coffee itself. When I returned to the condo in the afternoon, the emptiness welcomed me like a blank page. I opened a window and let a breeze riffle the papers on my desk. I sat down and began drafting the first episode script, weaving in lessons I'd learned, the utility of boundaries, the power of evidence, the necessity of letting go. As words formed on the screen, I felt the meditation of creation wash over me. Each sentence was a brick in the foundation of a future built on integrity. By evening, I lit a single vanilla-scented candle and poured another cup of coffee. The city lights had blossomed outside, a constellation of possibility. I reviewed my financial statements one last time, savings intact, retirement fund untouched, monthly support from Miranda arriving like clockwork. I totaled the numbers and allowed myself a small nod of satisfaction. I'd emerged from destruction with stability, even prosperity. I stood and walked to the framed Vegas certificate, touching its smooth edge. The pink neon chapel and blurry smiles felt like someone else's memories. I placed a post-it on the glass. Lesson learned. Then I turned and faced the open space of the living room. In that uncluttered expanse, I saw my reflection steady, unguarded, ready. Before bed, I closed all the tabs on my laptop and slid it into a sleeve. I set the framed decree on the bedside table next to a photo of my mother and me at her birthday dinner, laughing, oblivious to the storm that lay ahead. I switched off the lamp and climbed under the covers, the sheets cool against my skin. I drifted off with the faint hum of traffic below, secure in the knowledge that tomorrow I would wake unburdened by someone else's choices. As sleep enveloped me, I whispered to the darkness: coffee, condos, and closure. 3 words that summed up a journey from chaos to calm. And in that final moment before dreams, I knew I had written the perfect ending to this story and the perfect beginning to the next.